Welcome to the first lesson in our series on Armenian sentence structure. If you joined us for our masterclass series on verb conjugations, or if you're enrolled in our online Armenian school, you'll know now how to make simple sentences in different tenses. I am running, I am loving, I am reading, and so on. Today, we'll be looking at how we structure these simple sentences when we add adjectives, or words that describe what we're doing in more detail. Let's start by learning a new word, fast in English. In Eastern Armenian, we say arag, a-r-a-g. In Western Armenian, we say arag, a-r-a-k. Can you pronounce arag or arag depending on your dialect? Okay, and now we know what this new word, arag or arak, means. Can you read the sentence on screen in Armenian and then translate it into English? If you joined us for our verb conjugations masterclass, or if you've been with us for previous lessons of Online Armenian School, you will recognize these words highlighted in yellow. In Eastern Armenian, this is pronounced yes arag em bazum. In Western Armenian, we would say yes arak gvazem. But what about the meaning? The word for fast in Eastern Armenian is arak. In Western Armenian, we say arak. And so this sentence can be translated as I am running fast, or directly translated as I, fast, am running. Let's build some sentences of our own. How do we say I read in Armenian? The verb for to read is kardal in Eastern Armenian, or gartal in Western Armenian. And so using the sentence formulas that we learnt when doing verb conjugations, how would we say I read? Let's revisit the sentence formulas we learnt during our lessons on verb conjugations. To say I love in Eastern Armenian, we say yes sirumem. In Western Armenian, we say yes gö sirem. And so if the verb for read is kardal or gartal, then we know to remove the al at the end of the word to find the root word or the base word, which we will use to construct our sentences. Kard in Eastern Armenian, gart in Western Armenian. And you can see the letters on screen to help with your pronunciation. K or g, a, r, d or t, depending on your dialect. And so putting all of that together, how would we say I read in Armenian? In Eastern Armenian, we would say yes kardumem. In Western Armenian, we would say yes kartam. If you're learning Eastern Armenian, this sentence is probably just as you expected it. But if you're learning Western Armenian, this sentence structure may surprise you. Let's break down what we did again. Eastern Armenian sentence structure, yes sirumem. Yes, root word, sir, in this case love, and then m for am. In Western Armenian, yes, I, g, sir, the root word of the verb, in this case love, and then m, meaning am. We know that the root word for read is kart in Eastern Armenian and gart in Western Armenian. So why didn't we end up with a sentence structure, yes, g gartem? Let's break this down for you. The first thing to note is the repetition on the g and gartem. When there is a repetition of this nature, g, g, in Western Armenian, the initial g sound will be dropped. So in theory, we wouldn't be saying yes g gartem, but yes gartem. That explains why we lost a word in this sentence structure, but it doesn't explain why the sentence ends in instead of m. Yes gartam. Let's take a look at why this is. When we look at the verb for the Armenian word to read, we can see that in both dialects, Eastern and Western Armenian, this word ends in an al suffix, al. We learnt many lessons ago in Online Armenian School that verbs can end in al, il, or el. Kardal or kartal ends in al. And so in Western Armenian, the a from the suffix of the root word gets translated into the sentence structure. Yes gartam. If this verb were to end in il or el, we would see this expressed in Western Armenian with im or em accordingly. Let's take a look at some other verb suffixes to illustrate this further. Kailel, to walk, vazel, to run. Nestel in Eastern Armenian or nestil in Western Armenian, to sit. Hosel in Eastern Armenian or hosil in Western Armenian, to speak. Yergel in Eastern Armenian or yerkel in Western Armenian, to sing. And parel in Eastern Armenian or barel in Western Armenian, to dance. Let's take a look at these two in the middle, verbs ending in il in the Western dialect. In these instances, in Western Armenian, we wouldn't say yes gonna stem, we would say yes gonna stim for I sit or I am sitting. The I being transported from the verb suffix in that dialect. To say I speak or I am speaking, we wouldn't say yeske chosem. We would say yeske chosim. Because again, the suffix in the verb form in Western Armenian is il, chosil. Therefore, the correct way to say I speak or I am speaking in Western Armenian is yeske chosim. I am. It is an extra thing to think about when constructing sentences in Western Armenian. But as long as you know the verb suffix, il, el, or al, you will be able to structure your sentences correctly using these rules. Okay, we know how to say I read. How would we say I read books? Remember, the word for book in Eastern Armenian is girk. In Western Armenian, it's kirk. And to make a word plural, for words with one syllable, we add on the end, or for words with more than one syllable, we add ner. And so kirk in Eastern Armenian becomes girker, one syllable. Kirk in Western Armenian becomes kirker, one syllable. Books. I read books. Thinking about the sentence structure we just learnt then, how would you construct this sentence? In Eastern Armenian, I read is yes kardumem. Yes kirker kardumem in Eastern Armenian, or yes kirker kartam in Western Armenian. I read books. And if you're wondering about word order, stick with us. We have a whole lesson on word order coming up. I read yes kardumem in Eastern Armenian. I read books yes kirker kardumem. The literal translation, I, books, reading, am. In Western Armenian, I read, yes kartam. In Western Armenian, I read books, yes kirker kartam. You can see now why it's difficult for some people to understand both dialects. Even though the differences in pronunciation can be slight, when you add that to the differences in word order or sentence structure, things become much more challenging. Okay, let's make this sentence more complicated again. I read long books. We know how to say I read, and I read books. How would we say I read long books? The word for long in Eastern Armenian is yerkar. The word for long in Western Armenian is yergar. I read books, yes kirker karnumen, or yes kirker kartam. How would we say I read long books? We transform yes kirker kartumem or yes kirker kartam to yes yerkar kirker kartumem in Eastern Armenian, or in Western Armenian, yes yergar kirker kartam. I, long, books, reading am. As the literal translation. Hopefully this is making sense so far. But let's review again from the top quickly, just to make sure. I read. Yes kardumen. Yes kartam. I read books. Yes, kirker kardumen. Yes, kirker kartam. I read long books. Yes, yerkar kirker kardumen. Yes, yergar kirker kartam. Okay, time for a new one. We won't make the sentence longer at this point, but we will swap out some of the words. Instead of I read long books, let's try to say I read many books. The word for many, or a lot, or very in Armenian is shat in Eastern Armenian or shad in Western Armenian. How would we change this sentence, I read long books, to say I read many books? We swap out the word long for many. Yes shat girker kardumem in Eastern Armenian. Or yes shar kirker kardam in Western Armenian. I read many books. Or I many books reading am. I read yes kardumem, yes kartam. I read books. Yes kirker kardumem, yes kirker kartam. I read long books. Yes yerkar kirker kardumem, yes yergar kirker kartam. I read many books. Yes shat kirker kardumem, yes shar kirker kartam. Hopefully this is easy enough so far. To build sentences of your own, it's useful to be able to add context, such as where you do something, at home, why you do something, to learn or for fun, when you do something, after school, before sleeping, in winter, and so on. To do this, we'll introduce some new vocabulary words. The word in Armenian for four is hamar. Can you say hamar? The Armenian word for end is verj in Eastern Armenian or verj in Western Armenian. Can you say verj or verj? The Armenian word for ahead is araj in Eastern Armenian or arach in Western Armenian. Can you say araj or arach? Okay, and now to build vocabulary for the second part of our sentences. Home, learn, fun, school, sleeping, and winter. The word for home in Eastern Armenian is tun. In Western Armenian, dun. Can you say tun or dun? The word for the verb to learn in Eastern Armenian is sovorel. In Western Armenian, sorvil. Can you say sovorel or sorvil? Note the suffix on the end of this verb will change the way we express this in a sentence. El in Eastern Armenian, il in Western Armenian. Sovorel, sorvil. The word for fun in Eastern Armenian, zvarchank. In Western Armenian, zvarjank. Can you say this in your dialect? The word for school in Eastern Armenian is debrots. In Western Armenian, it is tebrots. Can you say this in your dialect? And the word for sleep or to sleep in both dialects is kanel with an L suffix. Can you say kanel? The word for winter in Eastern Armenian is zmer. Can you say zmer? And the word for winter in Western Armenian is smer with a TZ. Can you say this in your dialect? And while we're here, let's learn the other seasons too. Amar for summer, Ashun for autumn or fall, and Garun or Karun for spring. Can you say this? We now hopefully have all the vocab that we need to say I read books at home, I read books to learn, I read books for fun, I read books after school, I read books before sleeping, and I read books in winter. We'll go through them one by one together. And once we've learnt these structures, we'll also be able to say similar sentences, like I run fast at home, I run fast for fun, I run fast after school, I run fast before sleeping, I run fast in winter, and so on. I, verb, adjective, and then context. And of course, down the track, we'll also explore saying you, he, she, they, verb, adjective, context. And we'll play with this in present tense, future tense, past tense, and so on. Let's dive in. I read books at home. Remember, the word for home in Eastern Armenian is tun. In Western Armenian, it's dun. And remember, I read books in Eastern Armenian is yes kirker kartumen. In Western Armenian, yes kirker kartam. So how do you think we would say I read books at home? Yes tuna kirker kartumen in Eastern Armenian. Or in Western Armenian, yes duna kirker kartam. I, the home, books, reading am. If you want the literal translation. Or in English, we would say I read books at home. Let's test your understanding of each of the different words in this sentence. Which word here means I? Yes. Which word means read? Kar or gart? Which word means home? Tun or dun? Which word means book? Kirk or kirk? Okay. And which word means am? That's it. M. EM in Eastern Armenian. Or simply the M at the end of the gartam in Western Armenian. That's right. Well done. Let's switch gears now and read a sentence in Armenian, seeing if we can interpret it or translate it into English. In Eastern Armenian, the sentence on screen is Yes kirker kardumem sovorelu hamar. In Western Armenian, it's Yes kirker kartam sorvelu hamar. Do you know what this means in English? Let's see if we can translate the words one by one. What does yes mean? I. What does kirker or kirker mean? Books. I, books. What does kar or gart as a base word mean? Read, right. I, books, read. What about this M component? Am. I, books, read, am. What's this word? Sovorelu in Eastern Armenian or sorvelu in Western Armenian? Can you remember? And what about this one? Hamar. Do you know what hamar means? Sovorel or sorvil means to learn. Hamar means for. And so this sentence, yes kirker kartumen, sovorelu hamar, or yes kirker kartam sorvelu hamar, means I am reading books for learning, or I read books to learn. Let's try another. This time I won't read it to you. Take a few moments to read the words on screen in your dialect, and see if you can translate it into English. Some of these words will be familiar, others may not. Yes, I, kirker, books, kar or kart, read, am. do these last two words mean? Zvarchank in Eastern Armenian means fun. In Western Armenian, zvarjank. Hamar, of course, means for. Have a look at this sentence again. Do you know what it says in English? I am reading books for fun. Or I read books for fun. Okay, here's another one. Spend a few moments reading it in your dialect and see if you can translate it into English. Yes, I. Kirker, books. Kar or karch, read. Am. What about the other two words? Verj or verch means end in Armenian. Tuprots or tubrots means school. So what does this mean, this sentence as a whole? I am reading books school end. Or I am reading books after school. Armenian is a very literal language, as you can see. Let's recap. Can you remember what this sentence means? I read books to learn. What about this one? I read books for fun. And this one? I read books after school. Okay, here's a new sentence we haven't seen before. Take a few moments and see if you can work out what it means. The first line we know means I read books. What about the second line? Kenel in Eastern Armenian means to sleep. In Western Armenian, we say kenenal. Araj in Eastern Armenian means ahead. In Western Armenian, we say araj. So take a look at this sentence again. I read books when? Ahead of sleep. That's right. I am reading books sleep ahead. Or I read books before sleep. Okay, what about this sentence? The word order has changed a little. Yes, zmerane kirker kartumel in Eastern Armenian. Or yes, zmerane kirker kartam in Western Armenian. Do you know what this means? Yes, I. Kirker or kirker, books. Kart or kart, read. Am. Amar means summer. Ashun means autumn or fall. Mer or tsmer means winter. Karun or karun means spring. And so this sentence we know must mean in winter. I, winter, am reading books. Or I read books in winter. Okay, from the top again. What does this sentence mean? I read books to learn. What about this one? I read books for fun. Okay, how about this one? I read books after school. And this one? I read books before sleep or ahead of sleep. And this one? I read books in the winter. You made it through our first lesson on sentence structure. And don't worry, this is the longest lesson in the series, so it's much smoother sailing from here. Let's recap. Cart or cart is the Armenian root word for read. K or g, a, r, d or t, depending on your dialect. To say I read, we say yes kardumen or yes kartam. To say I read books, we say yes kirker kardumen or yes kirker kartam. To say I read long books, we say yes yerkar kirker kardumen or yes yergar kirker kartam. And if you're new to the language, this will feel like a little bit of a tongue twister. I read many books. Yes shat kirker kardumen or yes shat kirker kartam. We learned that hamar means for. Verj or verj means end. Araj or arach means ahead. Tun or dun means home. Sovorel or sorvil means to learn. Svarchank or svarjank means fun. Deprots or tebrots means school. Kanel or kananal means to sleep. Zmer or tzmer means winter. Amar means summer. Ashun means autumn or fall. And Garun or Karun means spring. We learned how to say I read books to learn. Yes kirker kardumem sovorelu hamar or yes kirker kartam sorvelu hamar. We learned how to say I read books for fun, and for practice you can read this again in your dialect. We learned how to say I read books after school, and how to say I read books before sleep, or ahead of sleep, as was the literal translation. And finally, we learned how to say I read books in winter. Yes smerana kirker kartumen, or yes smerana kirker gartam. You'll find practice exercises just below this video, which are designed to help you stretch your mind, practice what you've learned, and commit it into your memory, so that you can remember these new tools we've learned for Armenian sentence structure and use them to create sentences of your own. We'll see you in the next lesson.
This was a sample lesson from Tun Online Armenian School. If you're interested in learning Eastern or Western Armenian, you can sign up and start learning for free today at tunup.com.